Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Make sure you subscribe to the Charlie Kirk Show podcast and send us questions you might have for the great Dr. Zelenko directly, freedom@charliekirk.com. Doctor, welcome back. Can you walk us through the Nuremberg Code and how the people in charge, Fauci and others, might potentially be in violation of it?
Well, human experimentation without the consent of the person who's being experimented on, which was the problem, and one of the problems with the Nazi regime, where they did medical experiments in concentration camps on, innocent victims. That's exactly what's going on, because no one is being given informed consent of what these vaccines actually do. And if you look at the package inserts for these vaccines, they're empty. And so there's absolutely a violation of the Nuremberg Code and just common sense. And people are being given false assurances. These vaccines cause blood clots, strokes, heart attacks, myocarditis, increase in miscarriages from 10 to 82%, increase in cancers, increase in autoimmune diseases, ovarian and testicular dysfunction, and the dreaded antibody-dependent enhancement, and most likely infertility. And so there's no justification. The risks of these vaccines are horrific. And the FDA knew about that a minimum 2 months prior to their rollout, because they did a presentation to the internal scientists stating all the side effects. And then when the vaccines were rolled out and you looked at the VAERS database, which reports all the side effects, there was 100% correlation between what was predicted and what actually happened. So this is actually what's called premeditated first degree mass murder and genocide.
Some people say that it's hard to believe that in America that would actually be the case. They'd say that's an exaggeration, you're blowing it out of proportion. But also, Doctor, I think it's important for some of our new listeners, and we have 3 minutes for you to do this, then we have a very long segment for you to dive into it, that you don't use the Nazi comparisons lightly. That's used by the media all the time. But as a practicing Jew and someone who if I remember correctly, you had relatives that survived the horrors of the 20th century, you don't say that lightly.
So I'm from Ukraine, Kiev. During Operation Barbarossa in 1941, when the Nazis, the 2nd Division, approached Kiev, so I had my father's mother, my grandmother, and her family, her parents, her brother, and there was a grandmother there. And everyone was being evacuated to the Carpathian Mountains. Now, the great-grandmother was very ill and frail and couldn't travel, so her daughter stayed with her, which was my grandmother's mother, and her brother stayed. And my grandmother and her father were evacuated. When Nazis came, they buried alive and shot and buried alive over 80,000 Jews in a ravine called Babi Yar. And those weren't during the Holocaust, my family lost 40 relatives. Some of them died on the front as soldiers. For example, my grandfather was one of 13. Him and his brother were the only ones that survived. I grew up with this mentality. I grew up with the understanding of what totalitarian governments are capable of doing. And I see exactly what's going on. And the reason why Americans can't believe it is because who would think that in the freest country in the world, you can have within a few years a complete shift in policy. For example, you look at New York, they voted, even though it wasn't approved, it wasn't elected, but they voted on a law that unvaccinated people should not have health insurance. Or how about this one, that the governor could unilaterally detain someone, quarantine facility, if they're deemed a possible threat to public health indefinitely. So yeah, it's happening in America.
So, Dr. Zelenko, we have to take a break. That was incredibly compelling, and I think that I think people need to think deeply about what you're actually living through. You know, in schools all the time, they say, "Never again will we allow what happened in the 20th century happen again." There's Dr. Zelenko, who has 40 relatives who died in the horrors of the 20th century, saying it's happening. Wake up, everybody.